and welcome to Community Connect. This is Fatima Aslam. Today I'm joined by Nabila Mansoor. She's the Executive Director of Asian Texans for Justice, and she'll be talking to us about the amazing work that she's doing through her organization, and she's played a key role in the statewide and local civic leadership. So we'll be talking to her about this. Assalamu alaikum, Nabila.
Walaikum assalam.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. So, Nabila, the first thing that I want to ask you is why is it important for people to participate in the political space?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me here today. This is such an important topic, and I think it's a really timely topic. We are in the midst of a big election year, 2026. We're going to see the midterms in November. The entire country is going to be voting for some really important races. And so why should we, as the Pakistani community, as a Muslim community, why should we get involved? And it's really important that we do. And I think one of the reasons that it's important is because it's one tool for us to really empower ourselves. Many of us came from another country. We were immigrants, or we're children of immigrants. And we're here, and we want this country to be a place that we can also raise our kids. I have 3 kids. I want them to live here. I want them to continue to live here. And the situation as it is something that I'm not sure if my kids are going to want to live here. I'm not sure if this is going to be the best place for them. And just like my parents moved to this part of the world because they were looking for a better life, I'm not completely sure that my kids will also not having to move to find a better life for themselves. Yeah. So one way we're able to kind of make sure that we have a handle on the future of this country is through our vote. And the way we do that is we take part in elections. And so we are coming up on a really important election this year. It's going to be the primaries in every state. Here in Texas, we'll have primaries in March. March is actually a very common date for primaries for many of the states around the country. Other places will happen in different months. But in November, we'll have a really big election. And it would be great if our community came out and voted in big numbers.
Thank you for explaining that. And so, Nabila, you're the Executive Director for Asian Texans for Justice.
Yes.
Please tell us about the work that you do.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Asian Texans for Justice started in 2022. And the reason it started was there was a need for us to really look at what is it that we can do as an Asian community to make sure that we're standing up for ourselves. To make sure that our community is informed and making educated choices. So we do a number of different things. We do elections, like I talked about just a little while ago, but we also take part in other ways. When we have the Texas Capitol be in session, we should have Asians that are working within the building advocating and lobbying on our behalf. So we do a little bit of that. We know that the future is going to be with our young people. So we do a youth leadership program. We do an entire civic engagement fellowship where we ask interested Asian youth to take part, and we give them the skills they need in order to become the leaders for tomorrow. So all of these things really allow us to make sure that our community is taking part in election, we're flexing that muscle, that election muscle, and that we have a say in our future. We want our communities to reflect us. Right. We want our communities to hear us. We want our communities to see us. And that means that we have to be proactive. And so that's really why Asian Texans for Justice was created.
Yeah. So, Nabila, you've been doing this for a while. What are challenges that, you see coming up again and again? And also, do you feel that the participation has increased over the last couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say this. As a Pakistani community member, our numbers are high in certain cities, but they're not really high everywhere, right? There are places around the country where there just is not a lot of Pakistani community members. When you unite yourself with other folks from the Asian community, from the Asian diaspora, so those are people from East Asia, from South Asia, even the Middle East, our numbers grow vastly larger. And all of a sudden, we are a voting bloc that is something to be reckoned with. And so our numbers in terms of increase have really been growing. There was a lot of room for growth, right? Our community was not coming out and voting in the way it should. So it took a lot of work on a lot of different nonprofits like ours that spent the time making sure that we were getting the information our community needs in order to get them to vote. And it's a long process. The biggest jump is making a non-voter a voter.
Mm-hmm.
So it requires a lot of work on trying to convince people that they should vote. A lot of people from the Asian community come from countries where voting was not an option.
Yeah.
If you're Chinese, if you were living in China, you were not voting. What is voting? Why should I do that? Am I going to get in trouble? How do I vote? It's scary. It's not in the language that I understand, right? So doing all of that legwork takes a lot of effort. And so what we've seen is that our community, actually, the voting numbers have been growing exponentially. It's been kind of really an upward curve.
Mm-hmm.
We want to continue that. We are still not at parity. We are still not reflecting the numbers of people that are in our community. But with every election cycle, we're seeing more and more of our community members vote. And so it's been really gratifying to see our community come out that way. And what we've realized is, as a voting bloc, we can actually sway elections. One of the mottos that we have is that we are the margin of victory.
Yeah.
So when you have an election that's close, you either win or lose because of our vote.
Yeah.
And that is very powerful. And I think that's something that we really try to impart to our community, that we actually are very powerful. Even if we're not the biggest group in a community, if our community comes out and votes in big numbers, we can sway elections.
Yeah. You know, and you just mentioned how you work to turn a non-voter into a voter.
Yes.
So I guess what kind of work, you know, what does that look like? Because, I mean, you know, coming from the younger demographic of potential voters, I do completely understand what you're saying, because there are a lot of young people that are just kind of, you know, neutral, like it is, and to motivate them or to turn them into a voter or somebody that's actively participating, what does that take?
Yeah, and it's not easy, right?
It's not,
So it means we have to use every single method we can think of, and we have to be creative.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. A lot of time, immigrant communities, just the language barrier is what keeps them from voting. Those voting voter registration forms are in English, but if you don't really speak English, it's not your first language. When you go into the voting booth, it can be very intimidating. You have this machine, and you know, do you touch the screen? Do you move the knob? How do you do this, right? So there's a lot of hurdles for folks to try to actually go vote. And sometimes they don't really make it easy. So it means that we have to meet our community where they're at. So that means that we show up at the mosques, we put a little table out there, and we ask the imam, and during khutbah, can you please just remind people there's a voter registration table out there? And we just talk, and we tell them, hey, there's an election coming up. I think it's really important that our community comes out. Are you a registered voter? And we register voters that way. We work with our ethnic media partners, you know, our Pakistani newspapers, our Pakistani radio stations, our Pakistani TV stations, and we get the word out, and we tell them, hey, y'all, there's election coming. There are people that are voting. If we don't vote, our community is going to be left behind. We do a lot of work with the young people. You mentioned young people. Yeah. We will go to college campuses, especially college campuses that have a large number of Asian community members. And we try to talk to them and try to convince them that this is something that is important. Yeah. So it's a lot of different ways, but I think once our community gets it and that light bulb goes off, it really becomes easy. Yeah. I'll also say this, once someone votes once, it's much more easier to get them to vote again. Okay. So we find that biggest jump is from that non-voter to voter. But once you vote and kind of the mystique is gone, the fear is gone, you're like, oh, this is not that hard. It is much more easier to get them to come out again and vote.
So you mentioned, you know, the primaries in March.
Yes.
So what kind of work are you guys doing for that? And also, you know, if somebody's watching this show, how can they get involved?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We're doing a lot of work, and there's a lot of races.
Right.
There are 10,000 races on the Texas ballot. That is a lot of races. We are obviously not involved in every race, but we are involved in those races where our community lives, right? Okay. Those are the races where we know our community can make the biggest difference. And if our community comes out, we know we have a say in that race. Right. One thing I will say that will really get our community to come out is when they have a candidate that looks like them. That is really, frankly, your best get out the vote mechanism possible. People love to see someone who looks like them run for office. And I'm going to give the example of Mayor Mamdani.
Yeah.
He just won in New York. The number of South Asians that came out in that race literally like quadrupled. And it was because people saw themselves in the mayor. And so we see that here in local races too. You have a city council member that is from the Pakistani community, you will see the Pakistani community come out. You have someone from the Vietnamese community running for a school board race. Guess what? There's going to be more Vietnamese voting in that school board race. So one of the best mechanisms to get our communities to come out is to have our folks run for office. That is one more thing, I didn't mention this earlier. We also try to give our community the tools they need to run for office, because that is one more way we understand that it broadens our power base. Once we have folks in elected office, they are more akin to hear us, right, if they come from our community. And it also motivates and mobilizes our community to go out and vote in ways that they haven't. And Mayor Mamdani is a perfect example of the way he integrated his community. These were communities that were neglected, that were never asked, that were not included in the political process, and all of a sudden you saw them coming out and voting in numbers that we had never seen before.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you're so right about this, because one of the things that I've noticed in particular, I feel that, you know, within the South Asian community in general, we don't start teaching leadership from a young age. You know, that's the kind of trend that I picked up on, is that, you know, we make we raise children to be very good at their professional careers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, but very rarely have I seen people put emphasis on the fact that you have to engage in the community and also on some levels in the political process.
Right.
So what has been your experience?
You know, you're so correct. So growing up, I did not even know that I could become an elected official. Like no one told me that. I didn't know that door was open for me. I didn't even know that door existed. You know, I want to make sure that the next generation does not have that same problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is one way that it really is a lot of talent in our community.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it be wonderful if some of that talent was channeled in a way where we could do some public service? And that's what running for office is. It's really doing public service. And so one of the things we do is especially with college-age students, we try to hear where they're at. We try to hear their concerns. What are the issues that are most important to you? Well, how do you think we can solve that issue?
Yeah.
What is it that we can do? So in our leadership program, we kind of go through an entire series of exercises on how it is that we can actually make that change in a real palatable way by helping our community.
Yeah.
One of the things I tell our community members is, if you really want to invest in our community and see it grow, if you really care about, I don't know, the foreign policy that's happening in Pakistan, we can send all the money we want there. I'm not sure how. It'll just be a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we change the leadership in this country, and all of a sudden you change everything that happens everywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to do that, it's imperative that we invest in our community. We invest in people that are running for office. We invest in young people and give them the skills they need in order to be able to run for office in a way that they can, you know, maybe it's a city council race, maybe it's a school board race, but those are all stepping stones to higher office.
Yeah.
And then I'm seeing that change. Like in our community, we're seeing that folks are stepping up, they're putting their hat in the ring, and it is really hard to put your hat in the ring, right? Like you are going to open yourself up to a lot of attacks. You're going to open yourself up to a lot of criticism. But if you can get through it, you can make such a large difference that it behooves our community to make that investment.
Yeah, yeah. You know, Nabila, you're so, you made a very valid point. And we'll continue this conversation after a short break.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let's take a break.
Assalamu alaikum, Abu.
Happy birthday!
Walaikum Assalam, beta. Where is your bhaijan?
Abu, check your phone. I've already sent you something special in US dollars.
You know what, Abu? I sent you something too, but in Canadian dollars.
Thank you, beta. तुम दोनों पैसा इतना जल्दी भेज देते हो खुद कब आओगे इतना जल्दी
Soon.
Be connected with your loved ones in Pakistan with Lemfi.
A for app, B for best, C for confidence से D for download करो इसे अपने फोन पे. Time is precious, order food delicious. सारा पाकिस्तान बोले food पापा. Rum pum pum, food papa dum. Rum pum pum, food papa dum.
Barbecue गोला कबाब बिहारी बोटी ETC. Seafood, ice cream, cake or beverages.
रोशनी में सब मसाले चटनी केचप सारी डालें सब्जियां फ्रूट
कैसा गोश्त भी बगवा लेना. बेगम ने पकड़ा दी लिस्ट, कोई ना बहाना है. ट्रैफिक के झंझट में मुझे नहीं जाना है. Rum pum pum, food papa dum. Rum pum pum, food papa dum.
Tempura frozen food. Quick, easy and delicious. फ्रीजर से निकाला, कढ़ाई में डाला और मिनटों में तैयार. Super fast, super tempting. Tempura frozen food. The taste of perfection.
Assalamu alaikum, Abu. Happy birthday.
Walaikum Assalam, beta. Where is your bhaijan?
Abu, check your phone. I've already sent you something special in US dollars.
You know what, Abu? I sent you something too, but in Canadian dollars.
Thank you, beta. तुम दोनों पैसा इतना जल्दी भेज देते हो खुद कब आओगे इतना जल्दी
Soon.
Be connected with your loved ones in Pakistan with Lemfi.
Welcome back to the show. Nabila, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
So Nabila, tell us about, what do you think are the main issues that, are faced by our communities? Like, tell us about a couple of issues that you think are relevant to our community nowadays.
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually, as an organization, commission a poll
Okay.
every election year. So we'll be doing one in this election year
Okay.
as well. The last one we did was in 2024. And the issues that kind of arise to the top are the ones that you think would probably arise to the top. So education is a big one. Our communities are concerned about education, making sure that the kids have access to good quality public schools. Another one that I think maybe folks maybe not intuitively understand, but climate also comes up. And I think that makes sense in some sense because our community is oftentimes made up of small business owners.
Yeah.
And when you have small business owners, if you live in places like coastal areas like Florida or Houston, where you're very susceptible to natural disasters, and just say you have a gas station or a convenience store and it gets flooded, and all of a sudden you cannot open that convenience store for a couple of days. That's a hit on your business, right? Yeah. So climate is also one that comes to the forefront. Another one that we see really is important to the community is, of course, the economy. And we've seen this come up in a lot of different issues in elections that we had at the end of last year in November. Affordability.
Yeah.
People are concerned about their everyday cost of living. They cannot afford their groceries. They can't afford to buy a house. Their children are graduating from college and they can't find jobs. So all of these issues that are really of top concern to them really indicates something to us. Okay. That we can use that messaging on why it's important to vote if you care about the economy, why it's important to vote if you care about the climate, why it's important to vote if you care about healthcare costs. We use that data in order to craft our message when we talk to our community members, to let them know that if they care about these issues, then the way for them to make a change and see a change in those issues is for them to vote. So it's really kind of important that we do this poll. No one else does it. This is another thing we've realized, that no one will care about your community unless you care about your community.
Yeah.
We also know that both political parties, both Republicans and Democrats, do not reach out to our community. That means that when they are doing their get out the vote efforts, the folks that kind of get left behind tend to be the Asian community members. Imagine if you're a non-voter. If you're a non-voter, and I mentioned that it's really hard to make a non-voter a voter, then why would you expend limited resources in your campaign knocking on that door and talking to that person?
Yeah.
So it's almost like a cycle. Every election cycle, they only hit the doors of the people that vote. The people that don't vote don't get contacted. If they don't get contacted, they don't know to vote, and then they don't vote. So it almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like Asian community doesn't vote, but it's because no one's reaching out to them and telling them that they should vote. So that's where organizations like mine kind of come in and fill that gap. Okay. That we know that these are low propensity voters, that these are people that no one is contacting, but it's important that we contact them and make sure that they have the information they need in order to make an informed decision at the ballot box.
Yeah. So Nabila, can you tell us perhaps an example in the recent years where, having that representation kind of, represented the Asian interest or just benefited the community in some way or another?
Yeah, I mean, there's many examples. I'll talk about our two Muslim legislators in the Texas Capitol. So in 2022, we saw the election of the first two Muslim House representatives in state government here in Texas. Okay. So we saw Representative Sulaiman Alani from the Sugar Land area, and we saw Representative Salman Pojani from the Dallas area. Yeah. And it was a really proud moment for us. So what does that mean, right? Like, we see someone who's now in the House office. Like, what good is it for us? Yeah. I would love to kind of talk about why it's so important that we have Muslim representatives. First of all of a sudden we had an iftar at the state capitol, never been done before, where the House representatives and the Senate were invited to break fast. The Speaker of the House at that time actually kept a fast that day in order to be in solidarity with our community. We had recognition of people and holidays like Eid and Ramadan from the House floor. We had an imam do the opening prayer. And we also had advocates working towards making sure that our community's interests were taken care of. These folks were not in the majority, but they were able to put forth bills that allowed them to argue and fight for our community's interest. I'll give you one example. This past legislative session, there was a law that was going to disallow Asians from buying property unless they were U.S. citizens. So if you were a green card holder or some kind of immigrant visa, you would not be able to buy land here in Texas if you were from 4 certain countries. And of those 4 countries, 3 of them are Asian countries. So we worked closely with our Muslim reps to make sure that this bill did not pass in the way that would be detrimental for our communities. And we were able to pass an amendment that carved out an exception for immigrants. And that comes because you have built those relationships and have people that are willing to go to bat for you at the Texas Ledge and do the negotiations necessary in order to make sure that really bad bills don't get passed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, Nabila,
excuse me.
When you say Asians, we're talking about a wide group of people, right? Although we're kind of grouping them under one umbrella. And naturally, when you have so many different races, so many different ethnicities being represented, there's bound to be some disagreement. So tell me a bit more about how you build consensus. How do you mobilize people, to work for a particular goal?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the Asian American community consists of over 50 ethnicities and over 70 languages. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And so the way we do it is we have certain values that undergird our system. And when our communities get attacked, then we make sure that we are out there. So if the Chinese community is getting attacked, we will make sure that we are fighting for them. If the Muslim community is getting attacked, a lot of Muslims are Asians and a lot of Asians are Muslims. So we make sure that we are out there and fighting for them just as hard. So in terms of consensus, what that means is that we work with affinity groups and we try to find ways where we can find agreement and work together. We work with the Korean community, the Pakistani community. There are other organizations that are more ethnic specific, and they are all part of our partnership. And so whenever we do an event, we make sure to invite them. We make sure that we show up to their events. And in that way, we can kind of work together in a way that works well for all of us.
Yeah.
What we have found is that our power comes in our number. If the Pakistani community was just able to fight for itself, it would not have as much effect if they didn't have the Asian community behind them, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, your numbers are so much more larger, and you have much more influence and sway when you talk to elected officials.
Yeah.
So it's important to us to really make sure that we are representing all the communities that make up our beautiful umbrella, and we're working on issues where we can find agreement and alignment.
Yeah, yeah. So Nabila, we were just talking about how South Asians need to increase participation, right? But within South Asian, you have women. That is a different group. And you being a Muslim woman, you although the representation, the participation is increasing. Women within the community in general are less seen less out there. So how has your experience been, as a Muslim woman? And also, what message would you give to young women in America?
I'll say this. When I want a family to do something, if I want them to vote, if I want them to get involved, I don't go to the dad, I go to the mom.
Yeah, which is true.
Because really it is the mom that is kind of the engine of the family's work that they do outside the family.
Yeah.
And so if you really want to make a change, you really have to go to the woman of the house.
Yeah.
And that's just been a reality for me since I started doing this work. Having said that, it's not easy. I wear my religion.
Yeah.
Right? Like I wear a hijab. I am a outwardly Muslim woman. And I have to go into offices where sometimes you have legislators that do not like the Muslim community. And so all of a sudden they have a Muslim woman in their office lobbying and arguing for things that for marginalized communities.
Yeah.
So has it been difficult? There have certainly been times where certain things have been said to me where I'm like, that is, I think, not right. And I think that veers on racism. But it also means that we're breaking stereotypes. And I will say this, our community's conscience is in our women.
Yeah.
The people that do the work are the ladies. And that just happens time and time again. When you run a campaign, you will find that the people that work the hardest are the women. When you are doing this work and trying to get volunteers, you will find that it is the young women that will be the most active in their participation. So it is really the women that are the engine of our community. And I think the time has come for us to really take ownership of the leadership.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a work in progress. There's a saying in the political world that for a man, you only have to ask him once to run for office. For a woman, she has to be asked 7 times before she runs for office.
Wow.
And the reason is because it's hard putting yourselves out there. Women are more open to criticism. It is harder for them to raise money. So you can just kind of expound on that even more when you're a woman of color.
Yeah.
But having said that, the women are the ones that are the most confident, the ones that show up the most prepared, the ones that do the labor in order to make sure that things get done. And I think slowly we're seeing that and we're pushing for that. And something that personally I'm very invested in.
Yeah, yeah. No, Nabila, that's such a great message. And, finally, I want to ask you, what, with your organization, with all the work you're doing, where do you see yourself? What's the plan for the organization as well?
Yeah.
And, do you feel like, are you optimistic of where we're headed?
Okay, so am I optimistic? I have to be. I don't have a choice. And we're in a moment right now which is very strange. And communities of colors are being attacked and targeted. But this work is really important.
Yeah.
And every election to me is the most important election of my lifetime. And so I treat it as such and put my work and dedication to make sure that our community comes out, because I believe in a better future for us. And that's only going to happen if we take ownership of our power. And so am I optimistic? Absolutely, 100%. It means that sometimes we celebrate the small wins and not the big wins. It means that we make sure that we inculcate a lot of joy in our life outside of this work. It means that we pace ourselves so we don't get burnt out. But it also means that we show up. We are at a very, very interesting moment in the life of this country. And it's important that every single one of us gets involved. This is not the time to dilly-dally. This is not the time to not take this seriously. And so I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope when I see young people. And I see how fearless they are and how committed and dedicated they are, even when everything is going against them. And so I take heart in that. And I know that our community is one that is resilient and is going to show up and make a change. And that also gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Nabila, for taking out the time and sharing all this important information.
Thank you.
And, our message to everyone that's watching is that, get out, participate, and get involved, and hopefully increase representation for your community in the political space.
Thank you so
Nabila.
much.
Thank you. Thank you, Hum TV, for sponsoring this show. And thank you to our sponsors as well. See you next time with a new episode and a new guest.